Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hammer Podcast. Before we start, make sure to hit that subscribe button to help grow this channel. It is greatly appreciated. Today is May 15th, 2020, and our guest today is Mackenzie Millar. Mackenzie attended the Victory Christian Academy in Jay, Florida in 2003. Michael Palmer was running the facility at that time, and, of course, to nobody's surprise, he was a devoted follower of the late Lester Roloff. So, without any further delay, let's hear Mackenzie's story.
So, my name is Mackenzie Millar. A little bit about my background. I was raised in kind of a conservative Christian home. We were raised going to church, and that was kind of part of our everyday routine, but we were raised in a Methodist church. So we weren't raised around, Baptist fundamentalist Christianity. That was not part of the environment that I was used to.
Okay.
And so I had struggled a lot in school, especially towards the middle school. I would go to school and I would get bullied. I had a weight problem back then, and so a lot of kids would make fun of me and call me names and stuff like that. So it became an issue of me going to school, and I became truant. And so my parents, they wanted to put me into a place where they know that I would be at school all the time. And, that bullying was an issue. I was also put on some depression medication growing up. And I came from a very loving home. But, I struggled with depression and I struggled with anxiety and I had some ADHD. And so I couldn't really sit still in the classroom, and I really didn't want to go. And so my parents, being truant, I hadn't done any drugs. I wasn't promiscuous. I hadn't done any of those, those things that,
Right.
Michael Palmer would say, oh, this is why we have girls here because of that. Because to this day, even my mom would tell you, no, she didn't do any of that. It was mainly I couldn't go to school and function in school. And so this was a place that my mom could put me that she thought would help me. And so because I had been put on all of this medication, they thought it would be a good idea because they don't allow medication in the home that I was sent to. So they would detox you off of the meds.
Oh, man.
So my mom thought, she thought that this was like a safe environment for me to go to school, to get detoxed off of the medicine, and that, there would be doctors, noting what was going on. And so I wouldn't just be kind of left on my own detoxing in a center, that there would be medical staff, etc.
Right.
Now, my mom never, she never went to Victory to visit before she sent me there. And Victory will tell you, Victory Christian Academy is what I'm speaking about. They claim that they do not advertise. So they're not like the Hebs of the House where they have promotional videos and such. They don't do that. Okay. It's all done by word of mouth by the girls that lead the school. And so one of the, I think my mom ended up getting a referral from a Christian counselor that she had heard about Victory. And just to kind of, she thought it would be a good idea for me to go there. And so, I didn't know that I was going to Victory. They came into my room. I had two strangers come into my room, and they turned on the light at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they grabbed me. And they were like, you are going with us. Oh. And I had no idea who these people were. And they were from the program, from Victory.
You were at your house? Were you
yes,
at your
I
house?
was at my house.
You were at your house, okay.
Yes.
Wow.
I was at my house with my parents. And my parents, I like to call it a legal kidnapping. And why I say legal kidnapping was because my parents had already signed the papers that they could do this, but they didn't let me know at all that that's what was going to happen.
Took you completely by surprise.
Took me completely by surprise. I was literally having a panic attack in my room because, to get woken up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and you got, one was a male and the other one was female, but they were bigger than me and they were kind of dragging me down the hallway. And I'm like, who are these people? Where am I going? Crying, screaming for my parents. And my parents are like, just go with them. They're going to help you. And so that was very traumatic. And I got put into a car, and I still had no idea who these people were. I kept asking them questions, where am I going? And at the time, I lived in Orlando, Florida, and Victory Christian Academy was in Jay, Florida. So it's a bit a ways. I mean, it's on the Panhandle. So we drove from Orlando, Florida, to the airport. And from that point, they put me on an airplane, and they had me switch seats. Because this is part of the whole mind games that they play with you, is I was on a seat that had an exit door out the plane. And they actually thought that I was going to jump out the plane on the runway. So they ended up making me switch seats to, kind of block me in.
Right.
And it was really embarrassing because, there's this flight attendant. She doesn't know what's going on. And she's like, yeah, she needs to switch seats because, she might jump out of the plane. And the flight attendant's looking at us like, what is she talking about?
What year was
so this was in 2003. It was November 3rd, 2003.
Pretty recent.
And so,
yeah.
Yes. And so I got put on the plane, and, I went to Victory, and the first thing that we did was when I got brought to Victory, you could tell stuff was just nuts in the place. They took me into a bathroom to where I had to strip naked and in front of my peers. So this was not done in private, in your own personal time.
Yeah.
You had female staff in there. You had other girls from the program, and, you had to take a shower in front of them. And then I think they gave me lice shampoo. I did not have lice, but they made every girl, de-lice their hair when they got in. And as soon as I got out of the shower, they put me on what's called the buddy system, and I'll kind of go through what the rules of the place are and what the buddy system is. But essentially, when you first get there, I think it's for your first month, you're on what's called buddy, and that's basically a girl who's higher in the rank than you, who's been there longer, has to follow 3 feet behind you everywhere you go. So if you get further away from her, you'll get a demerit. And a demerit is writing lines. So you could get 1,000 lines, like, I will not walk away from my buddy, and you'll have to write that 1,000 lines. And sometimes girls would do what's called scrolling with their demerits to make their demerits faster. So instead of writing, I will not walk away from my buddy, girls would sometimes write I, all the way down the page to make it easier on your hand. Well, we were not allowed to do that. If they caught you doing that, you would have to write another 1,000 lines. It would double. And then you would have to write, I will not scroll. I will not scroll. And so everything was very particular. I mean, you could write lines to the point where you had blisters on your fingers. And then once you got a certain amount of demerits, then you ended up missing on Friday night. And Friday night, they kind of had, I want to say it was like a theme every Friday night. And it was really the only good thing that I can remember about that place was, they had, they would do different themes. Like, they didn't do anything with, Disney, but they had, a mock-up prom night. But it wasn't fun. Everything was still structured. And on Friday nights, I remember we got to get a can of soda. So you really wanted to go to Friday night because that was the only time you could get a can of pop or, eat some ice cream or get good food. The rest of the week was very structured. So you would want to go to Friday nights because you would get the good food, and sometimes they would put on a movie, which was not a religious movie, but it was a boring movie. It was a movie that was, pre-approved.
Right.
Pre-approved, pre-screened, PG. Yes. Rated G movie. And, in fact, they didn't even allow Disney movies there at all.
Disney movies are the devil.
Yeah, so Disney was out. You're thinking, The Little Mermaid, that wouldn't have been allowed. And so, girls wanted to go to Friday night because it was, it was a couple hours that you got free time and you were able to decompress a little bit in the place. But everything else was very structured. We had timed showers. Our showers were 7 minutes. You had to be in the shower, out of the shower in 7 minutes. If not, you got a demerit. You had to write lines. And your shower stall had to be clean. So you could get a demerit for dropping a piece of hair in your shower on the floor.
So you had to take a shower and clean the shower in 7 minutes?
Yes. You had to go in, shampoo your hair, shampoo your body, because they would check you and make sure you were doing this outside of the shower because, you had to. I remember there were girls that refused to do so, and they were sent to the Get Right room, and I will touch more on that.
Okay.
But, you had to shampoo your hair, wash your body, and make sure your shower was clean. There was not a hair. There was no water. Like, we physically dried it with our towels inside these showers, and it had to be out by 7 minutes.
Oh.
So, and they were timed. They had a clock, and a helper would sit there. The helpers are like the highest ranks of the girls. They would sit there, and they would time it, and they would be like, okay, that's your 2 minutes. That's your 3 minutes. That's your 5 minutes. By 7, you should have been out of the shower. So, yeah, it was very, very strict. But back to kind of what I went through when I was there, I was put on Buddy, and every shirt has a different color. So Buddy was yellow. You wore a yellow shirt if you were Buddy, and that's how the girls could distinguish you from the other girls. Okay. You also had to wear very long dresses. They were like skirts, and they had to be below your knee. And then you had to wear tights underneath those and, dress shoes. But these were not something that normally was provided by the parents. They almost had like leftovers from the other girls that had been there for years. And so you could get a pair of tights or a pair of shoes that were just horrible, and you'd be stuck wearing them.
Don't they realize that Florida is hot and humid and tights are really not the thing to wear?
Exactly. Ooh. Yeah, exactly. It did get very, very hot. And so that's what you were wearing for, the first month that you were there. Now, there was no guarantee that you would get off of Buddy. So Buddy was for a month, but there was no guarantee that after that month you were guaranteed to get off of it. Because some girls who did not flow with the program like they wanted, and they really wanted you to confess your sins and say that you were saved and all of that to get off of Buddy. You had to do that to get off of Buddy because there were girls that were refusing to admit. They would sit there and say, I've been saved. I believe in Jesus. And they're like, no, get right with God. And they would slam the Bible down. And these girls wouldn't get off of Buddy. They would be on Buddy for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, almost half of their year there. And so the program was set up to be a year long. However, when I was there, I stayed there for 13 months. So I stayed a month after a year. And then I went home for 3 months. I struggled to get back into the swing of things with school. And so I was sent back to Victory for another 6 months.
Oh.
Yeah.
Back to the dungeon. Yeah.
Correct. And after that 6 months, my parents finally pulled me from the program. I was nearing the age of 18, and they wanted me to be able to adjust, to normal life. And trust me, one of the fear tactics that they used in there was Michael Palmer. He would tell us, he said, it doesn't matter if you're 18 girls. He goes, I can send you to Genesis by the Sea, and you'll be stuck there till you're 21. So all of the girls were very fearful that just because we were in Victory and we were almost 18, we weren't safe. We were afraid we were going to be transferred to Genesis by the Sea, which was owned by him too.
You can't do that. Once you're 18, you're an adult. You can leave whenever you want.
Right, but we were all naive and so brainwashed and fearful of this place. We all thought this was true because of how much brainwashing, they did to us. Yeah. So I went, they have a schoolroom, and we only got, I want to say, 3 hours of school a day. And the entire day, we may have gotten 3 hours of schooling, and that was done through PACES. Same thing as Hepzibah House. They use the ACE program.
Yeah, so did Rebecca Holm, and yes, they all use that.
Okay, so Victory was on the ACE program, and I remember going in there, and kind of the first thing that you do when you get in school the first time is they have you do like a diagnostic test. Well, I was so frustrated that my parents had done this to me. I was so upset with them that I Christmas treed the whole thing. And they were telling me, don't do that, because that's going to determine where you are in your grade. But I was so upset, I just kind of, didn't care and pressed whatever buttons, because they didn't even allow you a chance to adjust. That adjustment period of what just happened to you. And at the time I was sitting in the schoolhouse, I didn't even know how long I was going to be in there. I thought, my parents are going to pick me up in a week. Like, this is only temporary. Nobody had told me I was going to be there for a year, or more than a year.
Well, yeah, they just pulled you out of your house middle of the night. Didn't tell you anything.
No, they didn't. And so I kind of, after I was done with my testing, all the girls were leaving to go to get ready for lunch. And I remember sitting there, and this was like one of the first days in school, and I sat there, and I sat right by one of the teachers in the school, and it wasn't Michael Palmer, it was somebody else. But I sat right by the teacher in the school, and I refused to get up. I said, I'm not leaving. I said, I'm going to sit right here in this chair. I want to know what's going on. I want to talk to my mom. I want to call my mom. I'm going to have a phone call with my mom. And I just remember he was turned to me, and he was so furious. You could see his eyes were like bloodshot. And he was just like, you are a bad girl, like slamming his hand down on the table. He's like, you're going to be here for a year. And that's the first time that it hit me that I was going to be there for at least a year. Oh. And I was just like, no, there's no way. I was like, I told him, I was like, I got bullied in school. That's the only reason I didn't go. I wasn't on drugs. I didn't run away. I wasn't promiscuous. I told him all this. And he was like, no, you need to get right with God, and you're a liar. And I couldn't believe that reaction coming out of a grown man, somebody that was, triple my age, to just yell at me like that. Like, I was 15 at the time. So for somebody to just kind of unload, it took me by surprise. And he looked at me, and he was just like, yeah, you're going to be here for a year. He was yelling at me. And I said, F that. And that's what I said out loud, because I was so upset. I said, F that. And he proceeded to tell me, he looked at me, and he grabbed my wrist, and he said, do you want a bar of soap in your mouth right now? He's like, because that's what we can do here. I said, you can't legally do that. He said, your parents signed a form when you enter Victory that we can intervene in that way. Now, I've looked over the forms that my mom had signed. Corporal punishment is part of it, but it's kind of glossed over. So these parents don't.
It's pretty vague. Yes.
Yeah, it's a vague term. And when I spoke, I've been talking to my mom about my time at Victory, and we're very close still. And she feels the same way about it that I do. She feels very deceived and tricked by these people. So, he slammed his fist down, and he was like, you want a bar of soap in your mouth. And at that point, I'm like, are you kidding me? I am 15 years old. You're going to pin me to the floor and put soap in my mouth. He goes, we will have girls floor you. I didn't know what that term meant. I was like, what is flooring? And flooring is basically where they have girls who have climbed the ladder in Victory, and they will take you and they will pin you to the ground, and they will sit on you. So you could have a girl that's 100 pounds in Victory. And there were girls in Victory that I knew that were 12 years old, as young as 12.
Yeah.
I was a 15-year-old, but there were girls that were way younger than me. And they would floor them. They would get the biggest girls that they could to sit on them, and then they would shove a bar of soap in their mouth and hold it there.
Now, just the process of sitting on somebody, that can be pretty dangerous.
Correct.
All that weight.
And yeah, and there have been a lot of cases where kids have been sat on with child abuse cases, or, just any old case that you look up, and, they end up dying because you don't know their history. You don't know if they have asthma. You don't know if they're prone to seizures. So sitting on somebody in that position is, it's very detrimental to their health,
yes,
especially when they're already upset, they're already aspirating, they're already crying, they're hyperventilating, and you add the element of sticking a bar of soap, which is their only source of oxygen, when their nose is stuffy and they're crying.
Mm-hmm.
So that luckily never happened to me, because at that point I was like, I'm not going to do this. Like, I got up, I apologized. I immediately knew, I had to follow their direction at that point, because I was going to be screwed if I didn't. And so I apologized, and he's like, yeah, you just need to get right with God, just follow your buddy and do what's right. And I was just like, oh, and we couldn't say okay. We had to say, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, sir. No, ma'am.
Right.
And, we could get demerits simply by saying yeah. Like, we couldn't say yeah. We couldn't say the word cool either. We weren't allowed to say the word cool. It was like neat or awesome, but we couldn't say the word cool, and I could never figure that out. And if you said the word cool, you could get 500 lines. So the buddies were on yellow. Separation was a pink shirt. And what separation meant was, if you kind of developed a friendship with another girl, there were no friendships that you were able to develop, because if the staff members caught you developing a friendship with a girl, they would put you on what's called separation, and that meant both of you would have to wear a pink shirt, a bright pink bubblegum shirt. And when we would go into the cafeteria, the girls would have to turn around and face the other way while everybody's in the circle doing verses and singing a song. These girls had to face the wall. It was a tactic of humiliation,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And that was a way of breaking them down, that they weren't, and all these girls did was try to develop some type of peace or normalcy by getting to some of these girls. And these girls weren't deceitful. They were just having friendships with other girls, but they thought they were too close. For instance, I personally saw people being put on separation that I knew they weren't friends and close like that. But, if somebody catches you enough with one person, they start to think, okay, they're friends with them.
Oh, so you weren't allowed to make friends.
No, and we were not allowed to know where the girls came from either. When you went into Victory Christian Academy, there was a board that was put up, and when you first come in, you get your picture taken. It's almost like a mugshot, and they would put these pictures of us up on the wall, and you could kind of tell what girls had been there the longest, because their pictures were closer to the top. The new girls had started at the bottom. So once the older girls left, your picture would move up the ranks, and you could kind of see how long you had been there. But on those pictures, it only had a name and their picture, first and last name and a picture. And we could never ask where that person had came from. We were even told after we left the program that under no means we were supposed to contact anybody. So we weren't allowed to contact anybody after. We were not allowed to give out phone numbers, nothing.
Okay.
And so that was kind of frustrating too, because, when you're going through something like that, you want somebody who can relate to you, who's been there, and that was taken away from you. Music was not allowed. As far as the music, it was very old hymnal music. And Michael Palmer kind of founded Victory Christian Academy after Lester Roloff's teachings.
Oh, Lester Roloff. I knew there was some sort of affiliation with Lester Roloff. There had
correct.
Oh.
So yeah, the Rebecca Holmes and everything like that. Michael Palmer would come out and say, it was founded after Lester Roloff. A lot of the rules, when he would get up there on the podium and scream, he would say, spare the rod, spoil the child. We all knew that. It was ingrained in the system. So Victory Christian Academy originally started out in California in Ramona, and it opened in 1985, and it was closed in 1991. And that was primarily because he didn't want to operate under state restrictions. Mike Palmer didn't.
Just like Roloff. Yep.
Correct.
Exactly.
So he didn't want to operate under state restrictions, and so he had to have certain licenses like that. They also came in and said, I think there was a LA Times article that said that, you know, the place was a death trap waiting to happen. That's what they're quoted as saying. So the school wasn't very sound. There wasn't enough exit lights, emergency lights, etc. And so, you know, he had to do all of this to keep his school operating, and instead he chose to close down. But there was a accident.
Yes. I read about
at the school in California.
Yes.
Yes. And so the news article will tell you that there was a girl, and she was helping out build the church. And the article is very short, and it kind of briefs over that a stack of lumber fell on her and killed her. But what really happened, what we were told in church in Florida, was that all the girls had to do manual labor also. So in between school and everything else, we all had our own particular jobs that we had to complete. If we did not complete it, somebody would check it. We would get a demerit if we didn't do it.
Okay.
And so these girls would have to do yard work, and there were several girls that were pulled out, sometimes even during school, to do yard work. And a lot of girls liked getting pulled out of school to do yard work and be outside because we didn't get to be outside a lot. I remember we only had a few days where we were really outside doing anything. And the Victory Christian Academy that I went to in Jay, Florida, it was a very long driveway. I mean, we didn't have the electric fence and the barbed wire, but you had a extremely long driveway, and the property was huge. So even if you tried to run, you couldn't get off of that property to save your life for being tackled.
Wow.
So there was no chance of even running off of it because of how long the property was. And so basically these girls got pulled out into yard work. At that point, they were helping building that new church, the church for Victory Christian Academy. Okay. So the girls were doing manual labor. And a girl was standing underneath what one of the pastors described as a donkey. And a donkey is kind of like, it's in a V shape, and it holds wood. And what it would do is, instead of going to the floor and picking up a 2x4 and bringing it to the roof, the donkey would hold all the lumber in a V shape.
Okay.
So they wouldn't have to go to the floor and bring it up. And supposedly, this is what I was told, that she was standing underneath it, and it gave way, and it collapsed on top of her. And she pretty much died in Michael Palmer's arms. That's what I was told. But, you know, she would have never passed away if we weren't forced to do this manual labor. She wouldn't have passed away if there were proper procedures being done on this building. Children, you know, should not be forced to do construction work. We didn't know how to do it properly. And so, yes, it was ruled an accident, but, you know, a lot of us speculate it was negligence. It was negligence on their part,
well,
you know,
yeah.
to have them do that. Genesis by the Sea was another school that he had opened. So the one in Ramona, California, it ended up closing right after her death. And along with the state restrictions, that's kind of what brought that to their attention, was this death of the student. And so he ended up opening another organization called Genesis by the Sea. That was also closed in 2004 due to child abuse. There was several articles about how the neighbors that lived next to Genesis by the Sea could hear the girls crying at night, and they reported it. They could hear them crying from their windows, and this is a big property, so you could just hear them wailing and crying.
I would have never guessed that there was child abuse at these places. I mean that's sarcastic, but I mean, you know, it never fails with these Baptists. They try to beat the devil out of you by abusing you, and that's not how you get people to transform into Christians. Because all you do is you make them mad, and you make them resent you, and you make them hate you.
Right, and this is supposed to be a religion of love and understanding, and, you know, Jesus came for the sinners, and, you know, here you have the exact opposite, where you're hated, you're a whore. And we got called whores by Michael Palmer. He would get up on the podium and call us whores. You know, we were called names. So if you can imagine a grown man yelling at a 12-year-old calling her a whore, it happened. So I basically had, you know, I was on medication at the time, and so I was asking for my medication before night. And I remember them telling me, they were like, you don't need pills, you need the gospel. That's what was told to me. So they were like, you're not getting any of your depression medication. No. Like, it's not going to happen. Yeah. So what happened is, instead of weaning me off of the medication, because I had been on this medication for years, what happened was I started having a severe withdrawal, and I started throwing up, and I couldn't control it. And I was puking everywhere. When I came into Victory, I was on the heavy side. I want to say I was 240. You know, it's a heavy set girl. Okay. By the time I had gotten out of Victory, I was 115.
Wow.
Yeah. And a lot of the weight loss had to do with the vomiting. And I wasn't taken to a doctor to be examined of why is she throwing up? Why is this happening? I was called a faker. And they threatened to start my time over for vomiting. So the vomiting started happening, and then what they would do is I would go to breakfast. I was a half without. So you had your choices in the cafeteria. You had halves and you had wholes. And then you had half without and whole without. And basically, if I remember correctly, half without was like the least amount of food you could get. And whole was like the most amount of food you could get, and you could get seconds. So I was a half amount. I was the least amount of food that I could possibly get in there, and I still could not eat it. And all of our meals were timed. So they were like, I think you had like 15 minutes to eat your breakfast and get everything down, including a whole glass of like water. So you had to chug the water and then eat the food as fast as you could, and then go off to your next whatever else you had to do for the day, which would usually be a chore. Before, you know, you had Bible study, and then you had preaching several times a day. So I couldn't eat the food, and I remember like gagging and trying to get these eggs down, and I vomited on my tray. And they basically took my tray and they wrapped it up, they put it in the fridge, and they served it back to me on the next meal.
Oh.
And I said, I vomited on this tray. Like, can I get another plate? And they gave it back to me stone cold, and they said, you have to eat what's on your plate, or you're going to get 1,000 lines. And 1,000 lines takes a very long time to write. And not only are you writing these lines, you know, your hand's blistering, it hurts, and it shoots up your arm when you're writing. So it's not just on your fingers. It goes up your arm into your elbow. So it's a very painful punishment. And not only that, but you're getting a negative reinforcement. So instead of a positive reinforcement, you're getting, you know, like, I can't ask stupid questions, you know, something like that, to where you're visually seeing it on the page. And so I opted to try and eat it. And then I got to the point where I couldn't eat that, and my food doubled, and they kept giving me back the same tray. I puked, and they told me, you're going to get 1,000 lines for every time you vomit in this place. So I had a girl who was a helper who, you know, they're like the highest ones on the rank, and she was just not very nice to me. She was like, you're faking it, eat the food, eat it, swallow it, you know, just attacking me. And I kept telling her, I can't do this. Like, I can't eat this food. I've thrown up in it. And not only would I have to eat my own vomit, I would have to clean up if I vomited on the table. So I was very sick, I was very weak, and I was having to scrub the floors, scrub down the tables. And I remember one of the staff members saying, like, what's wrong with you? Like, you think all these other girls want to eat off of your plate when you've puked on it? You know, what the hell is wrong with you? And I was just like, I can't help it. Like, I'm sick. But I never got taken to a doctor. I was never seen by anybody, you know, and a lot of times girls who are on a lot of medication, they go through severe withdrawals, but they chalked it up to, I was a faker, and I was not right with God. And so
you had the devil in you.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings me to what happened with Mike Palmer. So basically, one of the girls who was at the cafeteria with me, she saw me having to eat my own vomit. And all the letters from Victory, ingoing and outgoing, are read by staff members. And if you write something negative, it's blocked out. So it's blocked out with like Sharpie. Or it's not sent at all, and you're told to write another letter. And on top of that, you're given a demerit for writing negative things home to your parents. And so this girl had written home to her parents saying that I saw a girl, they forced her to eat her own vomit. And at chapel, he pulled me out from everyone. He was like, Mike Palmer did. He slammed his Bible down on the podium, and he was like, some girls in here think that we make, you know, other girls eat their own vomit. Do we do that, girls? And all the girls are like, no. You know, because you were brainwashed to go along with it. You couldn't speak up and say, yeah, you did. We saw it in the cafeteria. You had to go along with it. And, you know, after that whole sermon, which I knew was directed at me, because he would single girls out. Mike Palmer singled girls out. I saw him single girls out for their weight, for how much they weighed. I saw him single girls out that had a gay parent. In one sermon, he said, all of the girls that think that gay marriage is appropriate, stand up. And so one girl had a gay mother, and she raised her hand. And she was a helper, so she was higher on the podium. Wow. He made her stand up, and he ripped her a new one. You know, and this girl's just crying, because that's her mother. You know, he's talking about how she's going to go to hell, everything else. And it was horrible. So after that sermon, one of the helpers grabbed me and was like, was it her? I know she wrote home about her having to eat her own vomit. I know it was her. Mike Palmer looked directly in my eyes, and he shook his finger in my face, and he said, I know it's not her. But let me tell you, if I find out who did it, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. And, you know, it was this intimidation. And so what happened was we were kind of forced to write our parents as soon as we got into Victory. We had to write them 2 times a week. And they had to be full-page letters. They were not allowed to be a couple sentences. You had to write full-page letters, and it couldn't be anything negative. I remember I got in trouble for drawing how the bunks looked like, because my mom had sent me a letter saying that she wanted to know what it looked like in there, because she had never visited it before. So I drew a picture, and I got in trouble for drawing what the bunks looked like, where I was. And I got a demerit for that. But what happened is, yeah, these girls would write home about stuff, and they would block out their letters. So I would write my mom, and up until your 3 months, you were only allowed to write your parents. Anything ingoing, outgoing was read. And you couldn't write your friends. Any family member had to be approved, and it was very strict on who got approved. If they saw them as too negative or whatever, they wouldn't let you send letters to them. And even phone calls, kind of like they talked about with the Rebecca house, they were all monitored. They were on the other end of it. So you could only have a phone call once every 3 months for 15 minutes. And they were all monitored. And they would hang you up if you said something. So, you know, I wrote my parents, and no letters were coming in. No letters were coming in. And I was just like, what is wrong? What's going on? Why aren't they writing to me? Like, you know, internalizing that in myself. And I had found out that Michael Palmer, he took me aside in the cafeteria one day and he said, your parents do not love you anymore. That is why they're not writing to you, because they do not love you. You're going to be in here till you're 18 and maybe till you're 21. I'll move you to, you know, Baja. You know, and I'm going to start your time over. He said that to my face. He's like, I'd already been in there for 3 months and I was still having trouble vomiting. And he was like, I'll start your time over. And so no letters were coming to me, and I was told this affirmation that my parents hated me, and I believed it. I believed that they didn't love me anymore and that they didn't want anything to do with me. And so, but what I found out later was they were taking my letters from me. My parents would write every single time they could. And Mike Palmer would take the letters, and the other staff members would take the letters and keep them and not give them to me. And so I would be writing in vain to my parents hoping for a letter. I mean, even in prison, people get letters. Yeah. You don't cut off somebody's letters. You know, that's their source to the outside world. And so here I was being told that my parents didn't love me, didn't care for me anymore, and they held any communication that I had with my parents.
He lied to you.
He lied to me.
Yeah.
And you know, he emotionally damaged a lot of these girls. Not only physically damaged, because they did take down girls, they did paddle. There is a case where Mike Palmer paddled a girl halfway across the room. I've spoken to another girl about it, and she saw it happen. He would take her into his office, and they would paddle him with a wooden board. And she was paddled halfway across the room. So, you know, and a lot of these girls, they weren't doing things that warranted that type of punishment. I don't care, you know, what you say. They didn't do something that was that deceitful. It was like, we got demerits for biting our nails. They would do a nail check and have us hold out our fingers in the cafeteria and check every single one of our fingers. And if your nail broke off or it looked too short, you'd get 500 lines for that. So it was a constant state of fear, not just about, you know, you saying, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, but, you know, anything else, you know, in your life.
Yeah.
It was just very, very traumatic. And so a lot of these girls, you know, they worked the program. And what I mean by work the program is, I mean, they conformed to it to get by because you got special treatment when you did. And this leads into the Get Right room and the helpers. So once you're off buddy, if you're off buddy for a period of time, you can be made into what's called a helper. And there are kitchen helpers, and there are yard work helpers, and there are chapel helpers, and bathroom shower timers. So those were the girls that would time the showers, or shower helpers. And these girls were given responsibility over the other girls. It's at that point where they would hand you a little notepad, and you would write so-and-so demerit to so-and-so, and you could give them a demerit. So these girls who had been cooped up for these 3 months going through these horrible things, what are they going to do? They're going to lash out at other girls because they've developed this power now in the place. So it's kind of like Lord of the Flies where the kids are running it. And so they got any power, you know, they got on a power trip, any chance that they could get, they would write you a demerit. Now, some helpers were very, very nice. There were girls in there that just, they didn't want to give it, but they had to give it because if they didn't get it, then they could get one. Right. So if they did not give a demerit, the helper would get a demerit. So they almost had to give you one. And I eventually moved up the ranks to become a shower helper. But, you know, I was I was a little deceitful. I gave the girls extra time on showers. I'm not going to lie. I said 7 minutes is too short. I said, okay, that's your 3. And they're like, that should have been my 5. I was like, no, it wasn't. That was your 3. What are you talking about? You know, so I tried to make it easier on them any way that I could. And I could have gotten stripped from my shower helper status at that point. But I was almost in there a year by the time that I had made shower helper. But dorm helpers were the highest that you could get. And they had several dorms, and the bunk beds, they had bunk beds in each dorm, and the dorms were like love, joy, peace, mercy, and faith. And so these were all the dorm rooms, and they were all like bunk beds, and they had them stacked on top of each other. And, you know, the beds were not ideal. I'm not going to complain about, you know, where I was living, but they were hard. They didn't feel good. They hurt your back. And, oh, there was also a laundry helper, too. So none of the staff did the girls' laundry. None of the staff really did cooking. There was a staff member who oversaw the cooking and helped out with it. But for the most part, all the girls, we did our own laundry. We did all the cooking. I was a kitchen helper. Not a kitchen helper, but I helped out in the kitchen at some point. So, you know, the girls were pretty much running the show. We would get demerits if our drawers weren't straight enough. We would get demerits. We had to do kind of like the military fold on the bunk bed, and every day they would come in and check. So if you're running late trying to get out, you know, get to the breakfast, they would come in and check all the beds every single day. And if it was not that military fold crease, they would pull all of the sheets off your bed and throw them on the floor. And then you would get a demerit on it every single time. And then they would do dresser checks. So even your personal items were not personal. I remember I had a notebook taken away from me because I ended up listening to, a long time ago, I had heard something by Oprah to where she said, you know, writing in a journal is therapeutic. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to write a journal. Maybe this will help me get through this. My journal was taken from me because I was writing negative affirmations in the journal. And so they took that from me, and I got lines for that. So you couldn't even materialize on paper what was happening to you. It was all searched, you know. And so it was just kind of a crazy time. And for the most part, you know, the girls who were dorm helpers, they got along just fine. I mean, dorm helpers, now some of them did do wrong, and they did get punished, and they got taken off dorm helper. But for the most part, the girls, when I was there that were dorm helpers, they were untouchable. You know, anything that you did, they could write you up for. They were not questioned. So the girls conformed to the program to try to move up to this helper status, you know, to where you wouldn't be touched.
Definitely.
And, you know, right. So it was kind of like, it was girl against girl. It wasn't only staff against the girls. It was almost girl against girl, and you couldn't trust anybody, and you couldn't tell anybody anything, and couldn't talk to anyone because that was deceitful. But yeah, eventually, like I left Victory, I want to say in 2005. Like I said, I went there for 13 months, left for 3, and then got sent back there for 6 months. Now, when I got sent back there for 6 months, they, you know, one of the staff members was almost patting my back because in that period of that 3 months, there was a girl who my mom knew who was acting up at home. And, you know, part of this whole brainwashing thing, and we had to memorize verses and everything else like that, these long verses. We had to get them signed by a staff member. And I told this girl's mom when I came home from Victory for those 3 months, I told her, I said, Victory is a really good place, because I was still brainwashed at that point. I was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Like, you know, and this is where you have these conflicting stories of some girls remember Victory as a place that has helped them. But I almost feel sorry for them because they haven't woken up and realized that they were abused. They were not only mentally, but, physically abused in that place. And they still wanted, some of them still defend staff members, not all girls defend staff members. In fact, there's several organizations, including SIA organization and some of the other ones. And there's been several books written about victory. One just came out. It was called Pieces of Victory, and there was another book as well. So there have been survivors that have written about their time at Victory. But yeah, it was just crazy. And I remember one time they dragged a girl by her hair because she didn't want to go to chapel. And so we were all forced to go to chapel every day. And they came into her dorm, and girls grabbed her and drug her, and it was a staff member who dragged her by her hair. She had very long hair, all the way down her back. And because she was not complying, they grabbed her by her hair and drug her. But part of this was a lot of girls were not allowed to see it either because they would be like, keep your eyes to yourself. If you look over here, you're getting a demerit. So as abuse was going on, you couldn't process it. You couldn't look at it. I saw out of the corner of my eye what happened. And they drug her into what's called the Get Right room. And that is the room.
I was going to say, let's tell us about the Get Right room.
The room is very, very small. Now, obviously the one in California was different from the one in Florida, but it was basically the same thing. And it was a room that had nothing on the walls. You walked into it. It was the size of a closet, a very small closet.
Okay.
Where the helper would sit outside of it, and the girl would be inside the closet area, and there would be nothing on the walls, just carpet. And the rooms would smell because these girls, they had to ask permission to go to the bathroom. And if they thought you were a faker, they thought you weren't right with God, so they thought you didn't have to use the bathroom. So these girls would urinate themselves in this closet.
Oh.
And they would cry and bang their heads against the wall and kick. One of the stories was a girl in California. She was actually handcuffed and duct taped in the closet in Victory in California. The one in Florida, I didn't see anybody duct taped, but I will say they were floored in it. They were sat on top of, soap was in their mouth. They were tackling these girls in a closet. And the carpet wasn't a soft carpet. It was almost like a tweed type of carpet where it was rough. So if you scrape your arm on it, you get rug burn. So there was that aspect to it, along with the fact that it smells. But yes, they would put girls in there, and they would put girls in there all day, every single day, until they got right with God. And what would be playing would be a tape recorder blasting Lester Roloff sermons.
Okay.
24 hours a day.
Lester
and so
Roloff,
these girls
once again.
Yes. So it would be blasting, in the small little closet area, and these girls, for the love of God, couldn't escape it. They're stuck there. If they get out, they're going to get floored. They're stuck in this room. Now, they were given food, but their food was brought into that room. They were not allowed to go into the cafeteria. They had no contact with the rest of us girls.
Okay.
So they were, in isolation.
Right.
Kind of what you see on, Shawshank Redemption, where they hand the tray through the little, door, and you're in there by yourself. Mm-hmm. That's what it was. And the girls didn't get normal food. If they had gone into the Get Right room, they would get peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that were old, that sat there. It wasn't anything appetizing. They wouldn't get what the rest of us got.
Well, they were being punished. That's why.
Right. And so that was part of it. And, some of the girls that went in there, they weren't doing anything that was, I didn't see any of the girls attack staff members. I never saw that happen because Mike Palmer's accusation is that these girls are dangerous. And so we put them into the Get Right room because they can cause a lot of damage. I have never seen a girl in Victory Christian Academy the entire time that I was there, damage anything in that place. Not even pick up a chair and throw it. Never saw it.
Now there were rumors of a fire that started.
Right.
I think hear about that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was before me or maybe after me. I don't know too much about the fire because I wasn't there when that happened. But I do know that, you know, it was kind of like the heads of the house where they had alarms on the floor. So if you couldn't hold it in the middle of the night and hold your own urine to go to the bathroom, you know, you would get a demerit for asking somebody to wake up and take you there. So, you know, and those can rack up really, really quick. So you'd almost hold it to the next morning because they had, I don't want to say they were like lasers, but there was like floor sensors to where they could tell you were up. And it was a lockdown facility. And so I remember there were these two girls. It was Christmas Eve. Now, I spent my sweet 16th birthday in Victory and spent Christmas in there. And Christmas Eve, they would do this thing where they would move all of the tables in the cafeteria, and they would move them to the side. And this was kind of a new thing for them because they were trying to get away from the abuse allegations, even though they were still doing it. And so they moved all of the tables to the side, and they let us have, I don't know what you want to call it, a kind of a slumber party per se, but it was monitored by female staff. We were allowed to wear our pajamas, which were kind of like really long grandmotherly nightgowns or, you know, ugly pajamas.
Right.
And, you know, watch a boring PG or P or G movie. And we would sit there and watch it. And it was Christmas Eve, and we were watching a holiday movie. And I'm laying there, and the staff members are by the door. So they had two female staff that were going to monitor us all night. Now, we never did sleepovers in the cafeteria. That was a Christmas Eve thing that happened once a year. And, you know, it was, right. If we all were behaving, then we were going to get this. So it wasn't just, you're going to get this. It's like you all have to be good. And so we all were good because we wanted it. And so there was a bathroom connected to the cafeteria where the kitchen was, and then that door would connect to the schoolroom. And they had kind of like double-pane glass doors. And so one of the girls had asked to go to the bathroom. And so two girls went in there, and evidently the school door was open. It usually was locked. It was almost always locked, always set on an alarm. It happened to be open. They went in there, and they desperately tried to escape Victory. They took the principal's chair, which was like kind of a rolling chair. They picked it up, and they drove it through the double-pane glass. And we heard these two loud bangs in the cafeteria, and I'm thinking, what is going on? What was that? And then they quickly escorted us back to our dorms for the rest of the night. You know, we didn't enjoy anything. I found out later that these two girls literally went through the glass, scraped up all over their arms, all over their legs, trying to escape Victory. Now, this was 30 degrees. I want to say it was very cold. And a lot of people don't think it gets cold in Florida, but on the Panhandle, you know, towards Christmas, it does get chilly, and this happened to be one of the nights where it was very cold.
Okay.
And they drove it through the glass. They started running, and all around Victory on the opposite side, which is not Victory's property, but next to them was a cotton field, and it went for miles and miles. And these girls ran with no shoes on, no socks on, and ugly pajamas, no jacket, through the cotton fields, you know, where they have spurs and thorns and everything else that are getting into their feet.
Right.
When they came back, I was shocked. Their clothes were bloody. They had been cut up so bad from the glass, and, you know, they were just, it looked like they had been sliced from their wrist to their elbow on both arms. They were not given medical attention. The staff just kind of wrapped bandages around it and called it a day. But from how heavy they were bleeding because of how bad their clothes were stained, they probably needed stitches, and they didn't get those.
Well, that costs too much money.
Yeah, exactly. So there were girls that were being denied medical treatment in there as well. They would call them fakers or, whatever else. I remember one time I developed a respiratory infection, and I told them I was really sick, and I begged them and I begged them and I begged them, and I knew I was really sick, but they were calling me a faker. Well, finally, they would have one staff member take you out to a nurse. They would drive you to a nurse, but you had to be far along in the system for them to do this to you. And so the nurse wouldn't come in. Later on, they started having nurses come to the place instead of them taking you there. They took me to a doctor's office. I remember the doctor said, she has a severe upper respiratory infection. Like, she needs to be on antibiotics. She's had this for a while. And so, went through several weeks of having illness, and it wasn't treated. And so, it was one of those places where, the girls did labor. Staff would call you a faker, so you almost didn't ask for Tylenol or anything else because you didn't want to be yelled at.
Now, I don't know if you heard Cindy's story. She was from the Bethesda home, and she said that a lot of the girls never got their cycle.
Yeah, that was true. We never got our cycle in Victory. What was really weird about it was it was almost kind of funny in a way. But anytime they would bring in preachers, and this is where I'll get into different preachers, but preachers would come in and they would preach whenever Mike Palmer had a day off or wouldn't preach to us. And so they would bring in different preachers, and they were all fundamentalist Baptists. They all believed the same thing Mike Palmer did. And then some of the girls, after this young preacher had come, then they would all get their periods, and we all kind of laughed about that because we all thought he was cute. But, he was still yelling at us. He wasn't a nice guy. But, yeah, a lot of girls did not get their periods in Victory. I want to say I had it one time the entire year I was there.
Yeah. Some people say it's stress. Some people say it's something that was given to you. Because Cindy said that she had to drink milk that tasted like onions. Now, I don't know if it's what that was all about. It could have been goat's milk. It could have been some sort of chemical in the milk they made them drink. I don't know. But it just seems kind of weird that these girls, because usually when you have a whole bunch of girls together, their cycles start to go into sync together,
right.
But when they're not having it, something's wrong.
Right. And a lot of these girls, they weren't allowed, tampons or anything like that. They were given pads. That's all we could use. We just used pads. And, but, and here's another thing. Here's kind of another kind of torment on the girls, per se, is if a girl had her period and she was using a pad, and sometimes pads, it can leak over the pad and get stained on their underwear. If they sent that underwear to laundry to get washed and they didn't ask to physically scrub, now they would have to ask a staff member to scrub. So that's embarrassing on its own. So you would have to, if you had blood-stained underwear, you would have to go to a staff member and get permission from a staff member to scrub. Then you would go to the laundry room and you would say, I have permission from so-and-so. They're allowing me to scrub. And they would give you a toothbrush, and you would be in a sink, and you would have hot water, and you would have to scrub it out with a toothbrush before you could put it in the laundry.
So
and if you did not...
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry? If you did not do that, then they would give you a demerit for that. Like if they saw your laundry come in, because they initialed all of our clothes. You had in permanent Sharpie marker and black marker, you would have our initials. So we had each girl's initials in the laundry room, so we knew what dorm they were in and who they were.
Yeah,
so that's how we would identify them.
This is their MO. They humiliate you. They just degrade you to the point where you're just, when a girl, when these, girls are young, 15, 12 or whatever, they're like I told Cindy, their minds are moldable. they're weak-minded. Not weak-minded as in they're stupid, but they're still forming and developing. So that's what these fundamental Baptist idiots like to do. They take these girls with young minds, and then they shove this Bible and God and all this stuff into it, hoping to transform you into their little puppet. You know what I mean? It's something that a good little Christian, and it doesn't work that way. You have to want that. You can't just be forced, because if you get forced to do it, you're going to reject it, and that's right. So it's just something.
And a lot of girls that came out of Victory, some of them couldn't deal with the trauma and ended up committing suicide. Oh, there are several girls like that.
See, Palmer should have been sued for that one. I mean, the family, right? Because sometimes mental abuse is worse than physical abuse, and mental abuse can go on for years and years and years. And Palmer should have been responsible for those people, I think.
He should have been responsible. I feel, this is just my opinion, but I feel like he should have been responsible for Carrie. And I feel like he should be responsible for, some of the other girls that passed away, with the girl with the lumber. I feel like that was negligence. It was negligence. She did not have a choice to build that place. She was forced to.
Yeah.
So I feel like that, if anything, that would have been maybe, I want to say, some type of negligence. And I don't know if they ever tried to sue. I don't think so. But like I said, it just, the way that it was told to me, and I was told by one of the staff members who was there when it happened. And we were all told the story, and when we were told it was a faulty donkey is what they called it. It was called a donkey that held the wood, and it was faulty. And so who does that fall back on? That falls back on the school, making sure that they have correct equipment, So, like I said, that I don't think that was, not sure if it was investigated. I don't know. But I know that other girls who have left Victory, one girl even wrote a book, and, years later she struggled with anxiety and panic attacks from this place, and she took her own life. And, we kind of looked to her, and her story is kind of what got me to speak out about Victory, because I had been internalizing all of this for years.
Okay.
I didn't want to talk about it. Anytime I talked about Victory, even time I mentioned the name Victory, I would have to throw up. I had such bad anxiety about it. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to think about Mike Palmer. I didn't want to, and I had nightmares. I had nightmares into my 30s, because I'm 33 now. But I had nightmares into my 30s to where I would dream, and I dreamt that I was back at Victory, and I was trying to run, and I couldn't run, and I was just stuck in the same place. And they were reoccurring nightmares that would happen. So not only, and that's not just me. That's a lot of the girls at Victory that I've talked to. They have these same dreams of them trying to escape the place. And I have kids of my own now. So kind of what I wanted to do, why I wanted to speak out, about this was because I have a daughter, and, she's getting older. And so everything, she's wonderful, but my childhood started coming up, and I needed to deal with it, and get some healing for it.
Definitely. And I hope when people hear this, or even some of the girls that were there before hear this story that you're telling, that they will come up and also, give their story too. That way we can make people aware that they need to do their due diligence, and they need to find out everything they can about these places, because the websites, they only tell you the good things about these places.
And that was the hook, line, and sinker for my mom. Like I said, she had never visited the property,
right? But
she saw pictures of it, and it was this beautiful place. Look how well manicured it was. Look at all of this, I knew, and I can tell you for a fact that they started building waterfalls when I was there by the pool area. We had a pool, and the yard helpers would take care of the pool. So once again, the girls are cleaning out a pool, putting chemicals into it. I worked with chemicals in the shower. I have no idea what I was working with, and they didn't tell you how to work with them. So God knows, what that could have done. But,
right.
They had these girls lift these big rocks to build a waterfall just to make their place look nice. In the back of Victory Christian Academy, which ended up becoming Lighthouse Christian Academy, it was all the same thing. We built that place. The girls built that church. It was already pre-built. A lot of girls came in and added to the landscape. We were essentially doing child labor, for free. We didn't get paid for it, and we didn't get rewards for doing it.
Okay. Do you know if the place is still open?
So after Victory Christian Academy got shut down in Jay, Florida, so now we've already been through the one in Ramona got shut down. Genesis by the Sea got shut down by the government. They came in and raided the place with SWAT because of these abuse allegations.
Good.
And they found probable cause. Yes, they found the Get Right room. And they found the Get Right room in Genesis by the Sea, and so they shut that place down. And the one in Florida was opened, and that was the one that I went to. But then Mike Palmer got accused of raping a student. And it is in an article. I'm not going to name names, but you can look it up. There is an article on that.
Why am I not surprised? It seems like a lot of these guys, these Christian guys, always turn out to be some kind of sex offender. What is with these people?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
And that's the thing with Lester Roloff, too, is they ended up protecting one of their fellow pastors who ended up molesting, I think it was a 7-year-old girl in Sunday school. I'm correct?
God.
Yes. If you actually dive deep into Lester Roloff, you'll find out that he had a friend who, I want to say it was another pastor at the church, and he worked with Sunday school, and he was in Lester Roloff schools, and he ended up molesting a 7-year-old. And if I can remember correctly, they defended this pastor, saying that they would never be on the side of the accuser, or they would always be on the side of the accused, and that they felt, and I don't know if Lester Roloff said this or somebody close, but I remember reading a quote saying that they should never be judged, this guy who was accused of molestation should never be judged in a formal court. They should be judged by the church, not in a heathen court. That is what they said to the allegations.
That sounds like something Roloff would say. Yes.
Yeah.
I've dug deep into Lester Roloff's stories, and because I went to the Christian school that was there in 1982. So I know what was going on. I knew about Lester Roloff, about Wiley Cameron, and a lot of the people that were there. And there was a lot of abuse going on. There was actually one guy who was arrested for molesting one of the girls there, for elementary girls. So,
right.
I mean, it wasn't. I'm not sure what year this one, the one you're talking about, but the one I'm talking about was probably like in '84, maybe '83. But they took care of his ass. So
yeah, and once Mike Palmer was accused of rape, so he had a lot of friends in high places. A lot of people don't know this, but I think he was in charge of the board that actually oversaw Victory. He was the president. Okay. So if anything happened at Victory and there was an investigation into it, he was the president of that board.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sweep it under the rug.
So you can't, you don't have somebody on the outside investigating this place. He was the president of that. And, of course, he says eventually he stepped down, which he did. After the rape allegations, he stepped down, and it was rebranded. But I'm telling you, it was the same place, same exact staff. Mike Palmer left. Now, I knew something was going on because when I was almost getting ready to leave, a lot of the staff members were leaving out of nowhere. These are people that had been there all the way back from California, same staff members, and they were all packing up and leaving. They wouldn't tell us why, and I just thought it was really weird. And we were getting a lot of girls from the school, from Genesis by the Sea. They were transferring girls into Victory, so some girls would have to sleep on the floor because in some of the articles about Lighthouse, they were saying, oh, we only had 28 girls in the entire school. That was a lie when I was there. There was over 100 girls. In my dorm room alone, I want to say there was 40, 45, but you're combining all the other dorm rooms with it. So probably over 100 girls in the whole school. Some were sleeping on the floor. And their parents were paying Mike Palmer every month, and their daughter didn't even have a bed to sleep in. So that was kind of what started Mike Palmer, and he left, and some of the staff members left, but some of the staff members stayed. And it got rebranded. Victory Christian Academy got rebranded to Lighthouse Christian Academy. And once it was under Lighthouse, there were still the same staff members. I've spoken to girls from Lighthouse to see if anything changed, and they disputed. They said nothing has changed. Staff is still the same. The rules were still the same. They ended up cutting back some on the girls of how many girls stayed there.
Right.
But for the most part, it was still the same program. It was just rebranded to get away from Michael Palmer and what he was accused of.
And you know what's going to happen next. Once they shut that place down, when they do, because it's not a matter of if, it's when, they are going to move to another place, to another state, and cycle's going to start all over again. And this is the problem. You can't seem to shut these places down permanently.
No, they're protected by the state because of, religious beliefs.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they're protected. And they're so Lighthouse actually did get shut down, I want to say, for the same reasons. In 2013, they were officially shut down. However, a lot of places like Victory, like Lighthouse, like Genesis by the Sea, are still operating to this day.
You know what's ironic about that is the fact that I would say probably most, if not all of them, have got some affiliation with Lester Roloff. It all begins with that guy. That guy is a cancer. I'm telling you.
It started with and I ended up using kind of a Bible verse to talk, to my mom about Lester Roloff. I kind of used this Bible verses against him. I said, the Bible says that, if the root is rotten, to cut the tree down.
Yeah.
Lester Roloff was the root of all of these organizations forming, and none of them should exist.
But they do, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I'm not against reform schools if they aren't abusing children, if they're done in a very therapeutic way, if they have a nurse on staff, if these kids are being treated correctly and, they do want to help them and they have a therapist. Like, we didn't have a counselor in Victory that we could go to tell, some of these girls got sent to Victory and they were molested, and their parents didn't believe them.
And this is the reason why the state wanted them licensed.
Right.
Because if you're not licensed by the state can't go in there and say, okay, this is wrong, you need to fix it. No, they can't do that if they're not licensed. They can run it any way they please. They could throw soap in your mouth. They can molest you. They can do whatever they want. But they all do it under the disguise of God. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
It turns a lot of people off. A lot of atheists have come out of churches, especially, I know a lot of people who have come out, especially the Baptist churches, because I was born and raised in Texas. And I know that a lot of people from the Baptists have come out atheists because of the treatment that they've been given by these churches. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and like I said, back to my childhood, that's kind of why I was in such shock at this place, because, I was raised Methodist, but I was not raised like that. I had never heard of a pastor, and Mike Palmer did. He would get on the podium, he would call us whores. And there were also racist jokes that were made at other students' expenses. He would make racist jokes about African Americans and Spanish girls on the podium. So and somebody would ask, my mom had kind of asked me this question. She said, well, how come I never noticed certain things when I was there? So I'll explain that a little bit. Reason why you wouldn't notice a student in the Get Right room, when a parent or anybody from the outside came in, which was very rare, but if they did come in for a visit, the girls were taken out of the get right room and they were put in their dorm. So the parents wouldn't see that happening. And we were all told in advance to act a certain way, to smile, to clean your room, to, do all this, because we knew in advance these people were coming. And if we didn't act a certain way around them or, convince them to put their daughter there, you got preferential treatment if you could convince a parent to put her daughter there. We got bonus points. Like, not literally, but, staff would be nicer to you if you could walk up to the parent that was checking the place out and you said, "Oh, I love this place. This place is so great." A staff member would see that and you would get special treatment.
Yes. Kiss a little ass and we're gonna reward you. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
So a lot of stuff was hidden from parents, and they did it strategically.
Yeah, I just, the more I think about these people, the angrier I get, because there's just no need for these. There's no need for this. I mean, teenagers act out. Okay, that is a fact of life. My kids are in their 20s now, but when they were in their teens, they would act out just like a normal teenager. You don't throw them into a home. The only reason why you would actually throw somebody into a home, and I'm not sure if that's how it happened to you. I mean, you already said how. But sometimes it just either the parents don't want to deal with it and just, I want to make it somebody else's problem, or they just refuse to deal with it. It's like, you know what, forget it. Just do whatever you want or whatever. I don't know. I just don't know.
And for my case, my mother had already, my sister, by the time I was 9 years old, my sister had been put into a drug treatment program, which was called SAFE, which has been shut down for child abuse also. So me and her share a kinship.
Mackenzie, does that even surprise you anymore? It doesn't. Doesn't surprise me.
No. So we've kind of, we're older now, but we've developed a kinship over it. But, when I was put up for adoption when I was a baby, so it was almost like a second set of rejection that my parents had done this to me because they adopted me, right? And I had already felt this rejection because I was adopted. Not that adoption is wrong. It's a wonderful thing. I'm very happy that I was in a family and was able to be adopted. But, having people grab you in the middle of the night, drag you to a place that you were dumped at and told that your parents didn't love you by staff, it was almost like this second, thing that I had to go through where I felt rejected all over again. I internalized it.
Were there any pregnant women or girls at that home?
Now, I've heard a story about some of the rules in California. The school in California were a little bit different from the rules in Florida. But I heard that there was one girl in California that was pregnant, but in Victory in Florida, you could not be pregnant and attend there. So they would call in, for instance, I got called. So if you were pregnant, you weren't allowed to stay there. You were taken out of the program. Or if they found out you were pregnant, you weren't allowed to attend there when I was going to the school. But they accused me of being a whore and sleeping around in the middle of, the session. And they would also have girls do what's called a rap session where the helpers would attack the girls and the staff members would be watching. So not only would the staff, like Mike Palmer and everyone else who worked there, berate you, you would also have the highest ones up on the podium berating you too. But yeah, I was actually a virgin when I entered Victory, both times. And I was called a whore. So that, that does a lot of psychological, it messes with you.
Yes, definitely. But did they do it just to get a rise out of you, to see if you would get angry so they can just punish you some more? It seemed like they got off on this stuff.
Yeah, they did. They really they almost thrived on when a girl would act up or speak out, like when I said I was acting out in the, schoolroom, when I said, what I said to the teacher, he immediately went to, I'm going to get the soap, and we're going to floor you. And there was a girl who I've talked to who said that they got the soap and they ended up, Mike Palmer put the soap in her mouth and knocked her 2 front teeth out by doing it, by how hard he had forced the soap in her mouth. So You know, it's one of these places now. I know Hephzibah House has been kind of covered. I know Rebecca, and I know Bethesda has, but a lot of people don't know about this connection with Victory Christian Academy.
There's more out there besides these three. I mean, there's a lot more. And I said, hopefully people can come upon this podcast and say, because, you know, for me, it's just, hey, you want to tell your story, doesn't matter what it is, if you know what no matter what situation or what reform school it was, come in and let people know, make people aware. That's what I tell them, make people aware. So,
and I think that's the way that, you know, you're going to change legislation, and you're going to have people look into these places and say, you're not allowed to abuse kids. You can't do it. You can get kids on the right track without abusing them. Trust me, it can be done.
Yep. I know, I got kids of my own. I know. So it can be
but me
done.
and my mom have started the process of healing, and you know, she, like I said, she's had to go through this whole thing too with me, and she feels very deceived by this program because, you know, there's also that pain and guilt and hurt that she feels because, you know, she put me there, and she's immensely sorry for it. And I tell her all the time, I tell her, I love you. I know it's not your fault. I know you didn't know, but I want you to know what they did, you know. And so we're beginning in the process of healing, and I think it's good. And I think other girls, what I would say to them, like I said, I was too afraid to come out a long time ago. I vomited every time I thought of the place. I couldn't even utter the words, but, you know, if you get to the point where you can speak out about it, speak out about it. You know, we're here for you. We want to listen to you, and your story matters.
Is there a Facebook page for girls with the Victory?
There's a Victory Christian Academy group, but that's kind of close to the survivor girls who survived it. However, if I'll send you a link. You can post it in the description if you want.
Sure. Yes.
There is an organization that one of the girls have started to help survivors from not just from Victory. It's called the SIA organization, and I'll send that to you.
Okay.
You know, and she's willing to help girls from all walks. You know, doesn't matter. You know what program you were from. She's there for you, and she's walked it herself, so you know, she's really great.
Usually, those are the right kind of people, the ones that have been there and know exactly what you're going through. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Well, Mackenzie, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. This has been very enlightening. Like I said, I did do some research on this when we were texting back and forth, and the first thing I said when I was looking at the rules and regs and all that, I'm like, Jesus Christ, it is Lester Roloff. I mean, it's like a mirror image of Bethesda.
And Mike Palmer, Mike Palmer would quote Lester Roloff's teachings. So it was Lester Roloff.
And there was a King James Bible, right?
It was only King James Bible. Only King James, because any other Bible was not the truth.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
And like you said, they blasted out, of course, Lester Roloff. So well, like I said, I hope that people can get some good out of this, and they can, like I said, for parents especially, to I mean, if would it be the right thing to send your kids to a Christian home? I don't know. That's not my choice. If it were me, I would not send my kids to a Christian reform school or anything like that. I would try to deal with it myself. But like I said, some families or some parents can't do that or not willing to do it. So they need to know that, okay, now we have the internet now where everything is out in the open. And they can go to the website, find good things about it, but they also need to go to the reviews. They need to go to the forums and see if there's any bad things. And there's a lot of bad things about these places that nobody knows about.
Yeah, when my mom originally looked for Victory, that was kind of when the internet was in its kind of starting phases. You know, you're talking back in the early 2000s, and she didn't have a computer, and so a lot of those, you know, articles were not written till after I was already out of Victory. So even if she looked, she probably wouldn't have found much on Michael Palmer.
Like I said, there's no excuse for parents now. So, like I said, the internet is wide and it's vast.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information out there. So.
Yes, and they need to do their research and not just take staff members' words for how good the place is. Like I said, this property was beautiful. It was a gorgeous property, but it was maintained by the girls under, by their chores and stuff like that. So they really need to check into other things as well, not just the good reviews.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, Mackenzie, thank you very much. Like I said, send me the links, and we will get them on here. And I hope that your healing process takes full effect. I mean, I know it's going to be I don't know if it's a lifelong thing. It might be, but at least there's going to be some closure with your mom and all that stuff. So that's
thank you
good.
so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So stay on the line real quick, and we're going to go ahead and end this podcast. All right?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I want to thank everybody for listening today. If you or someone you know attended the Victory Christian Academy in Jay, Florida, and you would like to come on the podcast and tell your story, then text your name to the number or email on the top of the channel page, and we can set up a time for you to come on the podcast. Quick reminder, make sure to subscribe to keep this channel growing. So, for the Hammer Podcast, I'm Jason. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other, and we'll see you in the next podcast.